talking about cash flow and understanding cash flow, I was like, it's sort of like learning a foreign language, isn't it?
If you're still in break fix in any way, you've got to get that foot out and commit yourself 100% to monthly recurring revenue. It just makes cash flow and profitability easier.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.
Hello, I'm Sophie Law and welcome to Another Byte. This is the YouTube show for MSPs who want to improve their marketing and grow their business. And we do that every week by chatting to experts, and tagging along with them inexplicably is the man behind Paul Green's Marketing Podcast. That is, of course, Paul Green, who this week was having a little soliloquy on the podcast, if you missed it, about why not to lie awake worrying. Paul, I feel like this is life advice as a whole, but particularly you shouldn't lie awake worrying about your business.
No, you shouldn't. And before I answer that question, I have to ask you a question.
Uh-oh.
And I'm kind of embarrassed to ask this because I'm a former media professional. What's a soliloquy?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what a soliloquy is.
It's a Shakespearean ode. So you were being poetic. Does that explain it enough for you?
Yeah. So the thing is, it's the easiest thing in the world to say, don't lie awake in the middle of the night. And it's the hardest thing to actually do. And I remember, so I started my first business in 2005. And I always talk a lot about my old business because a lot of my business owner problems went away when I sold that business. And what I mean by that is the business I have now, I designed from scratch, having learned a lot of the things that were bad for me, even bad for my mental health. And I remember distinctly lying awake at sort of 3 a.m. and around about 2008, worrying about whether or not a client was going to fire us in the morning. And to put that in perspective, that was the time when we just didn't have enough cash to meet the bills. And if that client had gone, and it was a whale of a client, so it was an extraordinarily large proportion of our revenue. I cannot tell you today, 10, 15 years on, the name of the client, the name of the contact there, what we did for them, anything.
That's showbiz.
And that's showbiz. And that's the whole point. It doesn't matter. There are very, very few things that really matter. You know, even a couple of months down the line, I think the issue with worrying is when we wake up, especially as we get older and we have to get up in the middle of the night for a week, three times last night. Well, once you're in your late 40s, like I am, Sophie,
I wouldn't know.
Or maybe you don't drink any liquids at all from like 2 p.m. in the afternoon. But most ordinary people get up at least twice in the night for a week, or at least once. And the problem is it takes some time to go back. And all you need is that one tiny little thought of, what if we haven't got enough cash for payroll this month? Or what if so-and-so happens? And it's the what if, and it's very hard. And even now and again, I have the odd moment where I lose a few hours sleep to what if. It's the hardest thing in the world. And I think the only way you can deal with it is you've got to find your own personal comfort zone, your own personal happy thing. I'll give you an example. My friend Rebecca, who's my best female friend, second to you, Sophie. She's my second best female friend. Mm-hmm. She's my best. No, I was going to say she's my best female friend with dark hair. You're my best female friend with light hair.
I feel objectified, just so you know.
She told me off last week because I was still working at 8 o'clock on a Friday night. And she said to me, but Paul, you never used to work Fridays. You now seem to be really busy on Fridays. What's going on? I said, well, actually, we've got lots of projects, lots of things on whatsoever. I said, and if I have a series of events that I need to finish on a Friday, little things like checking our cash flow, reading the report the bookkeepers put together, looking at getting everything prepared for the management meeting on a Monday morning. If I stop the end of the week before I've done those things, I feel uncomfortable going into Saturday morning. Mm-hmm. And actually, I haven't worked a weekend for years and years and years. I would rather work till 11 on a Friday night to protect my weekend than doing that. So that's just an example of how I, as someone who has to be across those details, has organised his business to make sure he doesn't not sleep on of an evening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned cash flow, which we're going to get onto in just a tick. Firstly, though, if you're getting up 3 times a night, go to the doctor, please. But let's move on to cash flow. The way you were talking about cash flow and understanding cash flow, I was like, it's sort of like learning a foreign language, isn't it? Learning about cash flow, like
Yeah, it's horrendous. And how long have I been doing this? 17 years. And Luis, our wonderful guest who's going to join us shortly, I know has been doing it even longer. Not because he's older than me, but because he's just more experienced. That was a good get out there. This is the show where we offend everyone. No one comes on the show and doesn't get offended.
It's true.
It's no wonder half the guests don't show up for the recording, isn't it? The cash flow is the hardest thing to get your head around as the business owner, and the difference between cash flow and profit, because very few people have formal training on it, and very few of us who start businesses are good at accounts. I'm terrible at accounts. It's why I have to have a bookkeeper and a bookkeeping assistant and an accountant, because they stop me getting into trouble. And the one of the things I learned early on was the difference between the two. It's okay not to make a profit, but it's not okay to have a negative cash flow. And the difference between the two being, if you bring in $1,000 for a month and you spend $1,200, that's where you in cash terms, you have spent more money than you brought in. So somewhere you've got to find $200 to put in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Profit is a whole different thing, because I remember talking to my accountant in my first year of business, where I did £140,000 turnover in my first year of business, working on my own in my bedroom, working like 80-hour weeks, and I made £80,000 net profit, which was more than I'd ever made. But then I said to my accountant, "Where's the money?" And he said to me, "You don't understand. You've made £80,000 on paper, but a lot of that is us moving figures around. It's allocating this. You've actually spent some of your profit already. You've taken some of it as a dividend. You didn't know you were doing it." And this is where business owners struggle, because there's this whole world of accounts that accountants and CPAs have made up. And I think the thing you just have to focus on the most is cash flow. If I bring in 1,000 and I spend 800, happy days.
Yeah.
And you figure out the making a profit with your accountant. Got to be honest though, MSPs find this a lot easier than most other businesses because of the holy grail monthly recurring revenue. And any business, there are very few B2B businesses out there that have monthly recurring revenue, but in our world here, it is the norm. And if you're still in break fix in any way, or if you even got a foot in break fix, then you've got to get that foot out and commit yourself 100% to monthly recurring revenue, because it just makes cash flow and profitability easier. It's as simple as that.
Fantastic. Two other things that piqued my interest in this week. I can't remember whether you called them PITAs or pitters.
We called them both. We called them pitters and PIAs.
Let me tell you, I am banking that for use throughout my life, both work and privately. And also, what is a ticket frenzy? Because it sounds kind of exciting.
A ticket frenzy is where you have too many old tickets sitting in your PSA, and you and your team, you gather your team round. It's 3:00 on a Friday afternoon. You get pizzas in, maybe some beers for later, but certainly not while they're doing it. And it's literally, I'm gonna do the clap. It's crack on, everyone. Let's get those tickets closed, because far too many MSPs have just tickets hanging around. It's little things. It's either tickets that should have been closed and haven't been, or that's actually a 5-minute job. Let's just get that done and move on. Or it's worse is, and every MSP will get this, where someone has a problem. They open a ticket and it's urgent. And then you call them back 20 minutes later and they say, "Yeah, I'm too busy at the moment. Could you call me later?" And then 4 days later, that ticket's still open because you haven't been able to talk to them. So the ticket frenzy is basically, it's a cleanup. And I think it's a great Friday afternoon activity, because then you start Monday morning with a dramatically lower number of open tickets. And the goal here is efficiency. If we look at it not as a ticket, but an interruption to someone's day, which I think is a better way of thinking about it, because we've got to get our technicians to think about the world from the point of view of the people we're supporting. If you're sitting on 20, 30, 40 open tickets, some of them really aged, that's 30, 40, 50 open interruptions to someone's day or someone's ability to do business. So actually closing those and resolving them and fixing problems, that's what we're here to do. Plus, of course, stopping things from going wrong in the first place. And that's where a frenzy comes in. But you can't do frenzies all the time. Yeah. It's got to be an event. Which is why it's a frenzy. Yeah.
So it's maybe a habit, but a long-term habit, which is one of the things you were talking about with your guest on the podcast this week, Luis Giraldo, who's with us from Skillpad. Hello, Luis. Now, you did say a lot of interesting things about habits, which you can listen back to on the MSP Marketing podcast. But the thing that really stuck out to me in your chat about creating habits and the importance of creating habits was actually the contrast, which is the importance of preparing for the stuff that you can't make a habit and you can't plan for. So why is that so important?
I think habits are an interesting thing. I've had conversations with people like Paul Dipple where we sort of get into the diatribe a little bit about what is it that you have to do to be ready for sort of the next technology wave or the next thing that's going to come down the highway, and change your business or force you to adopt new ways of doing business or what have you. And I think it's more of a mindset than it is sort of being on top of any particular technology. It's sort of the welcoming change and welcoming the ability to sort of adapt to the changing needs of customers, the changing needs of the industry, and so on. And so I love the ticket frenzy. A number of interesting, let's just say, soliloquy and objectification and cash flow. You guys are just off the rails today on interesting topics. So yeah, I think it's more of a mindset, really, how you prepare for what's coming next in the industry and even in your own business.
And speaking of preparing what's coming next, another bit that I feel like could be general life advice as well as good advice for MSPs. You were talking on the podcast, Luis, about articulating your goals. Why is it a good idea to articulate them?
I think generally speaking, if you don't know where you're going, it's really hard to know when you've gotten there, or what is the place that you want to try and reach. And I think there's obviously milestone type of goals that MSPs set when they're setting out to start a business and be like, oh, I want to get up to 5 people, or I want to get to $1 million in revenue, or there's a number of these sort of perhaps sort of big ticket goals that are important to set to have some kind of North Star or direction. But there's also like technology goals. There's like, hey, we want to become more focused on automation, or we want to focus on that profitability of the bottom line. Perhaps your team is small and you can't really grow through sales as quickly as a larger team can. And so you focus a little bit more on that, saving time and saving resources and being able to achieve more with the current levels of staffing that you might have. So I think all those different goals play different roles in different stages of the evolution of an MSP, all the way from a one-person shop to a 200-person shop. So it's interesting to see that dynamic shifting as MSPs sort of evolve and become just more entrenched in what they're doing day to day.
One of the other very interesting sounding things you were talking about on the podcast this week is the very delightful sounding Nerdicon and the kind of the ongoing quest, if you like, for diversity in tech.
There's an interesting sort of layup of people that come into the business. And so a lot of the, I guess, conversations that are happening around diversity, inclusion, or DEI in general in technology we're trying to change things, I think, too late in the stage of evolution of the industry. And so we need just more people earlier in the intake process into STEM fields and technology and so on. And so this is kind of the effort that a lot of us, like everybody would love to see more women in technology, for example. But they're just not available for us to hire today. And so we got to go do the work, the early stages of getting more women in technology, for example, so that we have that opportunity down the line. And a lot of it is that long-term thinking too. It's like whatever small degree of change we can make today, in 10 years, it's going to have a big impact. But sometimes it's hard to see that forest for the trees in the 5-year timeline that you have to try and grow a small business, right?
And tell us a little bit about Skillpad. We always ask everyone that comes on a little bit about what you get up to when you're not sitting and listening to us waffle on on YouTube.
Faffing about. So I love Skillpad. Skillpad is a company that began its journey as Warranty Master back in 2014 or so. Warranty Master was a product dedicated to doing warranty lookups and populating information back into your professional services automation tool, or PSA, and plugging into all the different data sources that you might have, like your RMM tool, your documentation, your PSA, and so on. And as the company and product have evolved, the company rebranded almost 2 years ago at the end of 2020 as Skillpad, as we started doing way more things than just those warranty lookups. So today, Skillpad actually does a complete lifecycle asset management product, as well as the warranty information and plugging into all those tools. And in late December or late 2021, we acquired a fantastic company called Backup Radar. And Backup Radar does aggregate backup monitoring and compliance and everything to do with all the backups that you might be doing for your customers today. And so between those two products, we're sort of working on expanding a platform that is a little bit more unique in the way that we approach the MSP software stack. We're not doing an RMM tool, we're not doing a PSA tool, we're doing a lot of complementary things that really MSPs are helped along in their journey to grow their business and find profitability and just strengthen the relationship that they have with their clients. So we have a little framework that we talk about a lot, which is called the ASSI or ASSI framework, which is we want to help MSPs automate the data collection. We want to help them strengthen the relationships with their clients. We want to help them standardize on their processes, and we want to help them increase ultimately their profitability and revenue through all the tools that we offer. So that's kind of our North Star that also works very well for MSPs.
So it sounds like an ASSI is not a PITA. Am I in the right?
No.
Okay,
we'd love to think it's quite the opposite. Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Thank you, Louise. If you want to find out more, you can listen back anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast. Listen back to the latest one for Louise. We actually did one, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, Paul, on compliance as well, if you want to listen back. And that's something that interests you as well. And please do join us again for another Byte next week.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Podcast.
Another Byte.